Welcome everyone to the Sister Stories podcast. The aim of this podcast is to marvel at God's sovereignty over each of our lives as women and to encourage one another by sharing our stories. My name is Sophie and today I've got two guests with me, which is a special episode, and we've got Sam and Abi. Hello.
Hello.
Welcome. So let's start by both of you telling us who you are. So Sam, if you can start for us.
So hi, I'm Sam. I am a member at Cornerstone Church. I've been here a couple of years. I then went away, got married, and have come back. Come back with my husband. I'm a bringer of people. And I work locally in Kingston. And I'm Abby's older sister.
Great. Abi?
Yeah. I'm Abi. I'm Sam's younger sister. I have been at Cornerstone for, I think, around 7 years. I came as a student when I was 18. I currently am working part-time for the church as a ministry trainee, and I also work in A&E as a nurse at St George's.
Great.
That's what I do.
Lovely. So, Sam, could you start by telling us a little bit about your family background, what it was like growing up?
Yeah, sure. So we were in a family of four with my mum and dad. We grew up in a sort of a mix between Basingstoke and then later in the New Forest. I'd say we were a really normal family compared to school. We used to do like very sporty family sport on the weekend. I would say academics was really prioritised. Our parents weren't Christian, and very much sort of the worldly view of like believers in you work hard, you get a good job, that kind of thing.
Yes.
And I would say possibly only slightly differently was we were raised to be very competitive. So growing up, it was constantly, everything was a race against each other, that kind of thing. Which I think as the older sister who was bigger, that probably worked in my favour, but I think
It sucked to be me. Be smaller.
Okay. Yeah, anything you want to add, Abi, to that picture?
We grew up doing lots of sport. I think probably it was quite extreme compared to most families. We would spend most, especially as teenagers, we spent most of our weekends competing in sport. So it was what our family and our parents were dedicated towards, was us progressing and succeeding, both at school but also mainly in like athletics.
Okay.
That's kind of what our life looked like growing up.
Yeah. Is there anything significant that happened in your family life over the years?
So like Sam said, we grew up as a nuclear family of four. And then when I was age 12, I don't know how old you were. She was a few years older than me. Our dad quite unexpectedly told us that he had been having an affair. And at that point he kind of like left our family home, left us with our mum, and we then had to kind of change, everything in our lives really changed. Everything that we had around us in terms of our support network being both our parents got uprooted. Suddenly we didn't have our dad in the home. It felt like, although he'd obviously only had an affair technically from our mum, he also had left us at home. And that was quite hard to deal with as young children. And I feel that
happened very quickly. So we went from a family of four. He went away for a couple of weeks for work, and about 2 months later he'd moved out of the house completely and moved in within
So quite a shock, really.
Yeah, very quickly. And also I think we would both say not just physically left, but went from being a supportive, consistent dad to someone almost like a character transplant, so who would regularly lie, quite obviously, who would
quite like controlling,
and was found. So, for example, would come and, for example, like look after me and a friend like home from school, and my friend came up to me and was like, he's going through all your mum's cupboards, and like was taking things. I think he robbed us. Once.
So he broke into our home. He became quite manipulative. And it just and it was a shock because it was that there had been months of their relationship, and then we just got told really suddenly. Kind of felt like the carpet been pulled out from underneath us, really, because our parents and our family were pretty much all that we had that was stable and reliable, and suddenly that all changed pretty much overnight.
Was that restored later on, or what? How did that marriage carry on, really, between your parents?
No. So Dad left to live with the woman he had an affair with, and actually we're going to their wedding in a couple of weeks' time.
Right. Okay.
So that's pretty much how it's been left. I would say. I think we definitely, and I'm sure we'll talk about it later, battle with the what we perceive to be a change in what you would hope a dad would be, and trying to navigate what it looks like to be working with someone who you just can't quite trust, what they say.
Okay. Right. Let's carry on with the story, actually. So obviously you went from not being Christians to being Christians. So we know that already. So Sam, could you start with your conversion, because actually that's the first thing that happened, isn't it? So just take us through that.
I think it's and I think it's really important, like, to understand we were coming from what I would say is quite a suddenly broken family.
Yes.
I guess our idol of like family stability had been really rocked. I was really angry, really hurt. My poor mum had to face so many horrible. I was just awful to her. I sort of almost mentally, I think I blamed her because she was the one left. And I just remember she cried all the time, and I just saw that as weak. And it wasn't quite the case. Well, it was completely wrong, that, but that's how I saw it. And it was from that I actually went to live with another family for a while, to help us try and move on from the situation. And I was living upstairs in this house, and the mum of the family, a couple of hours away from where my mum was, and the mum from the family, I was terrified of, and she said, "Right, you're going to church." So every Sunday we used to be marched out to church. I didn't really mind going. It was quite nice that, to be doing something. I just wasn't that fussed. I was fine sitting there. But there was this girl who was a couple of years older, and she came bounding up to me, and she just talked to me and showed interest and care, and asked if I wanted to read the Bible with her. And at that time, just the thought of someone actually wanting me and wanting to care for me, nothing to do with Jesus at all, just that love of someone wanting to give me time, was so different. And I sort of snapped her hand off. So we used to meet every Wednesday, and we read Luke's Gospel, and we sort of went through it all, and we chat about other stuff, and it was just someone who would just sit and listen to me, and say that sucked, which was wonderful when life was hard. And we got to, I just remember, there wasn't a moment I became a Christian, but there was a moment where we read about the paralysed man being lowered to Jesus. And she said to me, "Well, do you think that's true?" And it was the first time anyone had asked me, "Do you actually think what the Bible is a story? Do you think it's true? Do you think there's God?" And I realised, over weeks following, I do think that really happened. Yeah. And if I think that really happened, I think the Bible is true. And if the Bible is true, then there is a Lord and Saviour who I need to listen to.
Yeah.
And I sort of became a Christian from that. It wasn't, I think I became a Christian at 18. I went to uni and actually learned what it meant to live as a Christian, which is sort of part of the learning story. But that's how I became a Christian, which was just in time for you, Abigail, to move. You moved up then to live with us.
So then by that time, our parents have also gone through, and so then my mum and I could move back home to Basingstoke, which is where Samantha was. And at that time, so I hadn't really heard anything about Christianity. We knew that Samantha was going to church, but it didn't really affect us or anything like that. We thought it was just nice for her. And then, but what happened quite quickly after we all moved back in together is that Samantha would invite me to come to church with her, and I was really reluctant to do that. Not really for any particular reason, not because I didn't really like the idea of church, but I just was like, well, I'm happy for you. I don't really need it. But then one Sunday, very near her birthday, I remember saying yes, maybe just to be I'm just gonna get this over and done with, so she can stop asking me. And I went to the same church, and I had a very similar situation with a different young person, so someone who was my age, who Samantha had obviously told them about me, and she was really excited for me to come. And so she came bounding up to me after the sermon. She was chatting to me, and very quickly I felt very similarly to what Samantha had, of these are people who are not my family. They're not people who I think should be excited to see me, or because they have to be, but they're people who are choosing to know me and love me. And I wanted to understand why. I wanted to understand why they cared about me and why they wanted to invite me to things and tell me about Jesus. And so very quickly I was in their youth group on a Sunday evening. I was given the opportunity to ask questions. Have quite a few questions. When we first started going, I would whisper my questions to Samantha because I was too nervous to ask them. But there were really faithful youth leaders there, as well as just like youth who were Christians, who were excited to tell us about Jesus. And very quickly I learned that it was because of what Jesus had done in their lives that they wanted to show me love, so that then I could know the love of Christ. And then very similarly to Samantha, I then sat under faithful teaching of the Bible, investigated it for myself, asked questions of what I was being heard, and realised that what the Bible was saying is 100% true. I experienced what the Bible was teaching in terms of the love of Christ through his people, and very quickly gave my life to him in that way. And so then became a Christian at that age of like 16, and then similarly got baptised and went off to uni, and then learned what it was to live as his.
Can you both tell us, maybe Sam, you can start, what it was like actually learning that practically? Did you manage to get stuck into a church straight away, or what was your life like at uni? Because you both became a Christian around that stage, didn't you? So
yeah, God is so kind to have given me a faithful church to walk into at uni, because I don't think I would have had a clue. God was very sovereign. I vividly remember suddenly realising, oh no, you have to be a Christian every day of the week, not just Sunday. And that realising that is going to be quite costly, and it's not something you can put a face on. It doesn't last. This has to be a genuine thing, that as you go through uni and you're offered different experiences, you actually have to say no to things and yes to things, and it's not necessarily about what you want. It's about what is right, what is right to be doing. And I think really fortunately families let me into homes, gave me dinners, raised me sort of with their children and with my peers, so I could see how everyone else was living, to learn what it is to be loving someone at a cost, what it is to be trusting Jesus at uni, which I really am thankful, because I don't know how I would have got through uni without that. What about you?
So I think we've both been really blessed with the people that God's given us to model Christianity to us. So we didn't grow up with it. It wasn't in the home, but very early on I think we both understood that it's not just a Sunday thing, and I think that's because we were given people who were modelling what they were teaching, and so from even before I went off to uni, I was serving in my local church. I was meeting regularly with people throughout the week. We were in like a girls' midweek youth group, like doing a Bible study. Like, we were enthusiastic about learning about Christ, and we had people around us who supported us in that. And definitely, like for me, when I came to uni, I think the same for Samantha, we'd never picked a church, even though we didn't grow up in the church. We were just taken to a church. So then going off to uni, the Lord was so kind in giving me Cornerstone, giving me friends around me, because I very early on was at everything, rocking up to things, quite happy to get in alongside people. Because I think a lot of that is because we grew up with a committed family. Like, we knew what it was to rock up for our family all the time and to have support there all the time, and then had lost that quite significantly from certain members of our family. But still saw it in people like our mum and some of our aunts and uncles. And so I think it's something that I've always valued in people, is to see people rock up and be committed to loving everyone, even when it's not glamorous. And so I've always valued that in church as well, seeing people just put in the work on the bad days, rocking up the same on the good days. And just like being welcomed into churches, like meeting people and them inviting me into their families, and just coming alongside them and seeing them live out Christ, and them giving me opportunities to serve alongside people. I think that's one of the biggest things in my faith, is that I've grown in situations where I've been alongside God's people doing his work, and that's where I've received the best blessings.
That's great. Where did you go to university, actually? I forgot to ask.
I went to university at Kingston.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, we know that, actually, so we did know that.
And I went up north in Lancaster.
Right, so I was wondering, how far away you were as well.
She moved as far away as possible.
Yeah, clearly.
And I stayed within an hour of our mum.
Yes.
Yeah. So there you go. So you've got, I guess, but you're still away, really, in a sense. But but you were more away than Abby. Great. Okay. If we just carry on a little bit in time, I guess. I just wonder what so obviously you've talked quite a bit about your family and the dynamics there. Can you tell us a little bit about your parents' reaction to your faith, and perhaps what that looks like now? So let's start with the first question. So how did they respond, especially when Samu turned to Christ?
Yeah, really, really good question. I think it's, my opinion is, it's fair to say our family would say it's a really nice hobby to have. I think it's something they can see so much value, and they're really thankful to how we have been loved, particularly like our closer family, thankful for how we've been loved and cared for through hard times and through great times. I think in some ways they think that's nice for you. Yeah. Maybe like, let's see what life brings, to see if you sort of stick with it. And then I would say it's really tricky, because on some sides, I particularly say my dad's side they're more founded in science. And so I would possibly say it's seen as a lack of intelligence. I think we've also found it at times hard, because it's been used as manipulation. So if, you say you're a Christian, so you should be able to forgive this, or so you should do this, which is really hard to navigate what it looks like to honour our faith and honour God in that, and also be a really good witness. We're really fortunate that we have particularly one uncle and aunt who have just been praying for us since far before we heard the gospel, who we're really thankful for, who are sometimes able to help. It definitely feels, when you go into some family situations, that you are vulnerable to a dig or comment. And also it is hard because our family really value commitment and time. And actually, we don't want to come on a Sunday morning and go and see them. We want to be at church. And that's really hard to explain, why we would want to spend time with people who aren't our blood family, without sending the message that we don't care.
Yes. It's like a very Cornerstone thing is that we all talk about each other as brothers and sisters. And it's something that our family often will pick us up on, pick me up on, is like, I'll just by accidentally refer to someone as like a brother or a sister, and they'll be like, oh no, but they're not your real brother or sister.
Yes.
And you're like, well, actually, I think they are in Christ, and I want to love them as my family.
It's completely understandable if you're not a Christian.
It's hard to
say. It's a mad thing to say.
Yes,
it is really strange. But it's definitely something we're praying for really actively, for our family who aren't yet Christian.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, so like our dad and his side of the family are quite closed off to it and can be quite aggressive. Our mum's side of the family is the side that's one thing where they kind of like it for us. So I remember when I first came to uni, mum was driving me home around Christmas and was like, have you found a church yet? I know that's really important for you. So I think they appreciate how important it is for us. Our mum has a big barrier around the hurt that she's received in her life, and that stops her from wanting to hear about Jesus. But the Lord's been really kind and let us talk about it when we can. And our prayer is just that in His timing and in His will.
And having said that wonderfully, so since a few years ago, we Dad and his new partner had a child, so we've now got a sister who actually, despite all their comments, is quite keen on our sister having a relationship with us. So is allowed to come and stay.
So we manipulate every opportunity to get her to a Christian thing.
Yeah, so we want her to come to a holiday club, and we want her to hear about Jesus. And when she's driving in the car and we really like a Jesus song, and we will sing it really loud, and that's really nice. And it feels actually, through such a messy situation, God is so kind to give us her as a blessing, as someone to enjoy and to evangelise to, and to share the greatness of like the family kind of thing.
Yeah, that's lovely.
Yeah.
Right. If we move on a little bit and focus on closer times, could you tell us both what God has taught you in the last year or so? Abi, do you want to start actually this time?
You go first. What has God taught me in the last year? So I've had quite a busy year.
Yes.
I've done my first year of my ministry training. I've got another year to go, God willing, and hopefully, I've really enjoyed it. I've enjoyed doing both my jobs this year, but there has been some challenges. But something that I've really grown in is my appreciation for the people that God's put around me. I feel really privileged that I get to spend a lot of my time reading my Bible and talking to people about it, trying to work out how to tell young people about Jesus. But something that I really value is being able to share doing that with other people that are not doing that on my own. I feel really grateful for the teams that I work in. I love the commitment that I see in people, and I'm encouraged by like being on the youth teams and seeing people rock up every week, do mad things for some teenagers just to try and get them interested and excited, because we all share in one goal and we can all play a part in that really differently. So there's some areas of my ministry where I'm a very, very small cog. There's some bits where occasionally I get given a bit more responsibility. That really stresses me out. Yeah. But it's just great to know that in all that we're doing, all of us are all working towards the same goal, which is growing God's kingdom, which I feel really grateful for.
Yeah, that's great. What about you, Sam?
Yeah, so I think sort of on the theme of like relationships and family, I think so. I'm, as I said, I'm relatively recently married, newly. And actually, it's something I don't think I necessarily thought that I would get married, or I particularly wanted to get married. And I remember, so my husband's called Alex, and I remember dating Alex. And basically, he asked me out, and I thought I have no good reason to say no from what I've heard about you and what I've seen. And that was basically how I continued dating. And I remember very much affected by our dad leaving out of what felt like nowhere. And I said to him, I will date, we have to date for a minimum of 5 years, because I have to be sure you're not going to leave or lie or disappoint. I think he had an issue with that. But what I actually learned was so little about him in the dating process and more about God. Because I realised that I could date him for 10 years, 20 years, and that time does not give me any more security. No. It's about heart, and the person who's in control of people's hearts is God. So it's not, can I trust Alex to commit my life to him and say, through better or worse, I will stick with you. It's actually, can I trust God? That he is a good God and he won't give me what I can't handle. And so I realised it doesn't matter whether I date him for 5 years or 5 minutes. God is good, and if this is the right thing, taking in the wisdom from other people and people I know, can I trust God with this promise I'm going to make? And it was a massive deal. And even now, like through the early part of marriage, there are some things you don't even realise from your past have sort of affected the way you make decisions. But actually, I've learned that God is so much bigger, and it's so much more is out of my control. But that's a wonderful thing, because if it was in my control, it would go wrong a lot earlier. But it's in God's control. And we've recently, like I say, got married, and we've had a really hard start to marriage, which has been seen, and it's been really tough to know that is this the way it's supposed to be? It's not supposed to be like this. But to be able to trust God that this is for my good, and this isn't that he's forgotten about me or left me, but actually through this hard time I can glorify him and I can honour him, has just made my opinion of God so much bigger. And I'm looking forward to many more years of just my vision of him getting bigger and bigger and bigger, basically.
So just more difficulties, basically.
Yes.
No, not necessarily. Lovely. I'm just going to ask you the last question. So, Sam, could you start us off and could you give us some advice if someone is in a similar situation as you were, and you're the only or one of the only Christians in your family? Maybe in hindsight, what would you have said to yourself, for example?
Yeah, really, really useful. I think fundamentally, take courage that you're not the only one. It often feels like that, but actually there's lots of other Christians who are the only Christians in their family, or very small minority. I think trust that it is God who changes hearts, not you. So it is not, you don't need to dissect every single conversation you had and make sure that you shoehorn Jesus into every conversation to glorify and let people hear about Jesus. But actually it's your character and consistency that he gives you that will make a witness. And I see that particularly with Abigail. I was living with Mum at one point, and she just said to me, "Oh, Abigail hasn't given me my Sunday evening text." And all Abigail does is say Happy Sunday. It's not telling her the gospel, but it's just introducing that actually that's really important to us and we want to share it. So trusting God in it, and trusting that actually Jesus, someone may come to faith in 5 years' time, and that's a wonderful thing. So when they're taking those moments when they happen, making sure that you don't think, so and so always rejects church, so I'm not going to invite them again. There's wisdom in it. Don't do it every week. But also, if there's a different event or a new event, taking the opportunity to say, do you want to come and do you want to share in this?
Because we don't know.
We're
not the ones in control. We don't know people's hearts, do we?
And if you'd asked me when I was inviting Abigail, she just kept going, no. And then one day, unbeknown to me, I think she thought it was my birthday present. She said yes.
I didn't have very much money back then.
So you don't know.
Yes, for sure. Well, but a slightly different question, Abby. What advice would you give to a younger Christian?
I think I would tell. I feel like I'm a young Christian. I've not been doing it.
It's fair enough. Or maybe someone in the. I'm sure you give advice. You would give advice to the youth, wouldn't you? So
I would probably give advice of just get stuck in. I think that's really important. I think both of us would say that that's one of the biggest things that blessed us is that we got encouraged and drawn into the church. So a big call to people who are already in the church to invite young people in, get them stuck in. But it's like even last Sunday, I was really encouraged by our young people, because in the morning I was in Sunday school and we were teaching about Exodus, and we had one of the girls in our Sunday school class ask a really intuitive question, which just showed that she was really listening to what she was hearing. And in the middle of the game, she stopped us to ask me this question, and it's just getting them in and getting them feeling comfortable to ask questions, because then later on in the afternoon I was with the Rooted lot, which is our oldest youth, and then I had a girl in there who was just loving seeing Jesus in what we were learning, and she was so excited to see more about him and to ask questions, and she felt comfortable to be able to do that, and that's really beneficial. Yeah. And then, like, even at the evening service, really randomly, I had a 6-year-old who was sat next to me and just asked, like, the most banging question of, is God even real? Like, is it? And you're like, whoa, that is such a good question. And there's a reason that they all feel comfortable everywhere to ask those questions. It's because they're encouraged to be intuitive, they're encouraged to weigh things up for themselves, but also they feel comfortable around the people that they know to ask those questions. And so I think that's my advice, is to just get stuck in, get involved, and get alongside people, because then you'll build up those relationships, you'll enjoy Jesus with each other, and you'll have the opportunity to ask questions to learn more about him. I think that would be my advice.
That's great. Thank you both for sharing your story with us today. And thanks everyone for listening. Just to let you know, this is the last episode of Sister Stories, but we will let you know what might be coming up in a little conclusion episode soon.